With 11 days before primary election day here in Colorado, let's do a quick roundup on how the races are going. We've seen the negative ads increase on both sides of the governor's race and a Magellan poll that seemed to confirm Jared Polis and Walker Stapleton as frontrunners. Meanwhile, reports show that over 200,000 ballots have been returned so far, with nearly 50,000 of those from unaffiliated voters. Patty, the unaffiliated voter mark has been the great unknown of this primary election. 50,000 is a big number. Now, I realize this is a small fraction of what's expected to come in for the entire primary election, but if those percentages continue, that seems to be able to tilt some of these tight races. What do you think?
Well, it definitely can tilt them. When we saw the most recent Magellan poll, that even with those who have already declared a party, 4 out of 10 are still undecided, so you already have this big unknown with the registered party voters. But now with the unaffiliated, the only thing we've seen is that more of them are turning in Republican ballots than Democrat ballots so far. But Democrats could also just be tardy. I would assume that's more the case. So we could see a lot of swing coming in. You kind of understand why we're not getting a lot of polling information. There was one reference to a really secret, sneaky, no one can figure it out poll that had Kerry Kennedy in the front, but the Magellan poll looked like it definitely was solid, at least in its surveying, and that Polis is definitely running ahead, although not polling much further than when he first got into the race. But you still, again, have 4 out of 10 of those Democrats undecided. So it could be a tight race. You see jockeying with Kerry, with Michael Johnston, and even Donna Lynn is pulling up some. So I think we could see some surprises, but I would be surprised if Polis didn't pull out on this.
David, as you see the ads increase from a variety of sources, it seems that both Kerry Kennedy and Jared Polis are pretty powerful PACs, all putting out the different ads. And you're seeing Mike Johnston still putting out his own stuff. Donna Lynn coming up from behind with her own things. We're also seeing Victor Mitchell get into the race with some pretty negative ads. Do you think those are going to be influential? I mean, it's a tight race. I'm not sure there's enough time for a lot of ground game. Are the ads going to sway more than they usually do?
No, I think they'll sway about as much as they usually do. In this kind of race where a lot of voters don't have maybe deep opinions on the various candidates, and people do those ads because they work. In terms of how unaffiliateds are going, you sometimes think like, oh, unaffiliateds, they're moderates, they're very undecided, they could go either way. As it turns out, among the group of voters who are independents, there's large numbers that some are Republican-leaning independents, but they just don't want to be in the party for one reason or another, and likewise, plenty of Democratic-leaning independents. So sort of the true number of swing voters is much smaller than the total number of independents. One thing in terms of truth in advertising, I did not attend the Western Conservative Summit, but I've spoken to people who did, and I was told that at that event, Victor Mitchell was passing out literature with his literature with the NRA logo on it, which is a trademark infringement and illegal, and was telling people that he'd gotten an A+ from the NRA, which apparently he was thinking about his one race for state legislature where he couldn't have gotten an A+ because that's only for an incumbent with a record of accomplishment, and his rating in this current governor's race from NRA is a question mark because he refused to answer the questionnaire. The candidates who actually got grades were Walker Stapleton got an A, Greg Lopez got an A, and Doug Robinson got a C, all of whom did answer the questionnaire, unlike Mitchell.
Penn, with a tight race like this, and it's a primary, you still have to focus on your party first. I get that. And not knowing exactly how much of an impact that unaffiliated voters are going to make, it's hard to say how much of your message should really go there. But in this case, when you're seeing such a tight race on the Democratic side, are you surprised we're not seeing more, I guess, something thrown towards unaffiliateds to maybe take some of that, less of the party base messaging?
You know, not surprised because I think it's happening in other ways. I think when you look at Donna Lynn and Mike Johnston's commercials, they tend to try to pull at more unaffiliated voters. Kerry and Jared are engaged in this negative battle back and forth, sort of dealing with the far left end of the party, battling over teachers and unions and charter schools and the like. And once the teachers went negative, it gave everybody else license to go negative about being negative, and so there you go, and you start spiraling down. All of the campaigns are targeting unaffiliated voters, probably through their calling, through their lit drop, through their other programs. And the other thing that's interesting here is the numbers tell a story, because unaffiliated is what, 34, 35% of voters here, and they're participating in almost 25% of ballots turned in so far. So that's a pretty hefty percentage. The other thing to be mindful of is I think unaffiliateds in our state tilt Republican, because what's happened over the years in Colorado is with Trump and with the religious right, you've seen more and more of what I would call traditional Republicans get fed up with the party, and they go unaffiliated because they just don't want to deal with the nonsense anymore. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see more unaffiliated ballots come in on the Republican side of the race than the Democratic side of the race.
Ed, you're immersed with all the politics side and haven't had a chance to really contribute on the governor's race here for a while. Is there anything that we're missing about this race? Is there some underlying story that us and our viewers need to know what's going on?
Well, I think when we're talking about the polls, the underlying story that we're missing right now is the one that I'm being told by several people in the business community who have seen both business polling and polling from other groups, and that's not the race we're voting on June 26th, but the race in November. I mean, you see Polis, and everyone's kind of seeming to put Polis out by 10 to 13 points right now. And it seems like most everyone has conceded that Walker Stapleton is going to win the Republican governor's primary. I'm told by somebody that they've done polling on matchups, and that Polis starts out with a 4 or 5 point lead on Stapleton, which is basically a toss-up at that point. Kerry Kennedy starts out with quite a significant lead on Stapleton, and that if Michael Johnson, who's only been polling around 10% in a lot of the polls we've seen, if he were to somehow pull out the Democratic nomination, he starts out with such a monumental lead. There were questions about how much money would come in on the Republican side of the race. Now, of course, that's just the inverse order of the way that the polling is going in the primary right now. And I think for so many years we focused on Republicans and whether or not they want to elect an electable, they want to nominate an electable candidate or kind of a dogmatic candidate. And that's because Republicans have had a lot of these primary matchups. Democrats have eschewed primaries for many years now. Now we're seeing them full on in this, and apparently they're starting to steal a page from the Republican playbook, and they're really trying to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. So I think that's the underlying story, is that as people, I think the people who've gone to the polls right now already are the hardcore people who don't care about who fits who in November and what that'll mean. I think the ones that are left, especially unaffiliated, might be thinking about that. Like, how can I get somebody into this race that will be the person that wins in November? And that is certainly not what the polls are showing right now on the Democratic side.